We are now living in times where it seems even the Jewish community themselves seem to be divided. Some Muslim leaders have forgotten about other Muslim countries, and people whose wealth is based on their religion should be doing much better to lead their people in their faith. In the West, many Jewish families have great influence and power and could use their money for more than just war and control. Looking at history, I understand why you would maintain some, as you would like to learn from history. But if we look at, say, Israel and the Zionist movement, you are making it very hard for someone to defend your narrative and movement, with some of the actions being made and places you hold in a lot of the countries in the world in terms of power and influence. With great power and influence comes great responsibility. The churches in most countries of the world have lost the true meaning of religion and helping people, as well as the values that are meant to be held up by their book. It's no wonder many people are turning their back on it. The world is more connected than it has ever been, but also even more disconnected than it has ever been, where people carry opinions set in stone without a mind willing to be open to new information. Being kind is seen as a weakness because we are all struggling to get by without any time in the world to consider each other's feelings. Where the people at the top seem to get along just fine, no matter their race or religion, but convince the people at the bottom we must hate each other for our race or religion. Now, is this just the problem coming down from the top? From my experience, it isn't. This is an individual issue where we often allow negative experiences to outshine the positive ones we have, or we allow what we are told to think override our actual experiences, whether that be from your parents or other forms of programming you've had growing up. We see in our young children that racism is taught alongside any other kind of hate, and it's everyone's responsibility to play their part to fix that. Another thing Tupac was ahead of his time was the breakdown of the family home. What we are seeing now is a reflection of how society has ended up with single mums bringing kids up without fathers. This leads to a lot of young men without the guidance of a positive role model as a man, and creating a strong positive mindset to navigate an already harsh world. And then young girls with no fault of their own don't know the value of a good man, and as a result there is a lack of respect for men. We can blame the government for playing its part, but a lot of it is down to personal choices, and the more we give our problems to the government to fix, the more control they have over things. I also think there is a great disrespect for the single mums who are doing the best they can in a hard world, especially when many rights are taken from parents in terms of being able to control an unruly child, and they are many who are single by no choice of their own. And now we are in a position of generational trauma, or lack of functioning households, or just general struggling households where toxic behavior has become the new way of showing love because so many people are messed up and broke. In a lot of ways, we have come a long way in racism. From when I was a kid till now, it's clear to see things are moving in the right direction, but it's often the few that ruin it for the rest. Will things ever be perfect in that area? Probably not. Different races have different cultures, so naturally different music traditions you won't always enjoy or agree on, but it doesn't mean you can't get along. It's about compromising and respecting one another. I think London is a perfect example to the world that we can get along when you respect one another. Now, it's also clear racism isn't something that has just gone, but I think it's very much more of racism where you can have friends of other races, but some people will still hate other races, but they can't even really say why, or it's some stupid reason. For maybe the black community who might say I'm not qualified to talk on a subject because I'm not black, I'll agree in some ways, but disagree in others. I have grown up around black people enough to get an idea of what it's like from the outside perspective. And being white, I get to hear what is said when there isn't a black person around, which you never get a chance to hear.
Many things are going on in the world I think a lot of people do not realize or are ignorant. With slavery, yes, we can go back thousands of years and say this person was worse or this group was also slaves, etc. But the difference, I think, that frustrates black people the most is slavery ended, then racism followed, and ever since then, they have fought a battle to just be treated equally as normal human beings. Where in history they have been denied the opportunity at jobs needed to build wealth and survive, then when they have had to do whatever it takes to survive, they are classed as lazy or criminals when the basic human instinct is to survive. This builds a generational problem that is slowly being fixed as time goes on, which we can see in society now. Race does not dictate if you are good at something, black or white, whatever race you are. We are all capable of giving a fair chance. Now, I also understand going way back, it would have been very complicated when slavery ended. As how do you go from treating people like they were to letting them into society as normal? And I think we also forget a lot of the time we are always looking back at history with the mind of how things are now. The mindset of everyone back then would have been different, and values as well. You only have to look at the brainwashing that happens now and how easy it is to make the masses think a certain narrative. Now, the question I ask myself the most is, if I was a white person back in them times, what would I have done? I think if you make it to the end of this video, you might get an idea of what I would have done, as many of us now are living in a system very much like slavery. It just looks prettier now. Most things that go on in the world you can bring back and relate to a personal relationship. Something bad happens in a relationship, but you choose to work through it. If it ain't left in the past when forgiven, you will constantly have problems in the future. Not saying you don't learn from history or forget about it, but history can't be changed. But the more you keep it relevant, the more likely it is to repeat itself. The only time history should still be mentioned or spoken about in current affairs is when that history is still relevant.
Now, I can't remember the woman's name, but there was a beautiful African lady video I saw on TikTok, and she said she understood parts of history. It was for the survival of your people. But what about my people? This is the side of slavery. And the hold the world has had in Africa, no one truly understands. People on the news will talk about drugs and how, even as someone using it, you are just as much to blame because of the misery that happens from producing it. Now, using these news reporters' logic, I guess it means we hold just as much responsibility for the minerals that are mined in African countries that are in most technology we are using today. Africa has been the richest continent in the world, but without the correct education and an army to enforce, they get a fair price for their resources. They are the most undeveloped nation in the world, and to this day, many superpowers of the world have a hold on these countries. Now, am I saying this is all a responsibility of the rest of the world? No, it isn't. Africa has its issues it has to sort out. But you can't say you are not racist and you love black people as much as you do your own and ignore this as a major problem for the world. Now, I think the biggest thing we're also forgetting about the black race, and one thing we do not give them credit for, is the amount of forgiveness they've displayed throughout recent times. Is it all totally by choice, or would some things have been different if they had a superpower to support them? In that case, we will never know, but what we do know is the black race has gone from being slaves to then really abusing black people, then slowly treated as equal, and they haven't tried to take revenge yet. Now, does this mean there aren't some who might want that to happen? I can imagine that is also a possibility, but does it mean the whole race has to continue to suffer because of a reaction to our actions? More often than not, people who have suffered the most are the best people for leaders and influences, as they know what pain is like, and they often carry a great amount of empathy.